The mission was already unraveling before the sun dipped behind the jagged ridgeline. What was supposed to be a swift in and out operation had turned into a nightmare the moment the SEAL team realized their intel was outdated. The compound they were sent to secure wasn't lightly guarded. It was crawling with hostile fighters who knew the terrain far better than any satellite image could show. The first burst of gunfire shattered the calm, echoing through the valley like a warning bell. And from that second on, every step forward felt like walking deeper into a trap. They moved with discipline, instinct taking over as years of training kicked in. But even the best training has limits when the odds keep stacking against you. The team leader barked orders through the chaos, trying to reposition his men while rounds cracked past their heads and chewed into stone. Dust filled the air, mixing with the sharp smell of gunpowder and sweat. Every angle seemed compromised. Every bit of cover felt temporary. They weren't just under fire, they were being hunted. Communications began to fail as interference jammed their signals. Calls for air support went unanswered, dissolving into static that mocked their desperation. The team's medic dragged a wounded operator behind a crumbling wall, applying pressure with hands already slick with blood. Time slowed in those moments, each second stretching painfully long as the realization settled in. Extraction was no longer guaranteed. The enemy numbers kept growing, shadows moving along the ridges, silhouettes appearing where there had been none moments before. Ammunition counts were whispered, not spoken aloud. The numbers were bad, too bad. Each operator knew what that meant, even if no one said it outright. This wasn't about completing the mission anymore. It was about survival. The valley had become a kill zone, and they were pinned at its center. The weight of responsibility pressed heavily on the team leader's chest. Every decision could cost a life. Every mistake would. Despite the fear clawing at the edges of their minds, no one panicked. That was the unspoken bond of the SEALs, calm under pressure even when death felt close enough to touch. Still, there was a shift in the air, a quiet acknowledgement that they were running out of options. Grenades were rationed. Shots were fired only when necessary. Eyes constantly scanned the horizon, searching for a miracle that logic said wouldn't come. As enemy fire intensified, the team tightened their formation, backs nearly touching, creating a final defensive perimeter. The sun had fully set now, plunging the valley into darkness broken only by muzzle flashes and tracer rounds slicing through the night. In that moment, surrounded and overwhelmed, the SEAL team understood the brutal truth of their situation. They were elite, they were skilled, but even elite warriors could be pushed to the edge. And right then, standing in that hostile valley with fading ammo and no backup in sight, they were closer to that edge than they had ever been. The longer the firefight dragged on, the clearer it became that hope was thinning with every passing minute. The SEALs had survived impossible situations before, but this felt different. The enemy wasn't rushing blindly anymore. They were patient, coordinated, tightening the noose with calculated movements. From elevated positions along the ridgeline, sporadic sniper fire forced the team to stay pinned down, denying them any chance to maneuver. Every attempt to reposition was met with a hail of bullets that drove them back into shrinking pockets of cover. Radio checks continued out of habit more than expectation. Each time, the same answer came back: nothing but static. The satellite link was dead, and the backup channel wasn't faring any better. Without eyes in the sky or air support, they were effectively invisible to the outside world. The realization settled heavily among them. No one was coming. If they got out of this valley, it would be on their own terms or not at all. Fatigue began to creep in, the kind that drills into muscles and dulls reaction time. Their breathing was heavy, controlled but strained. Sweat soaked into their gear despite the cooling night air, and hands trembled slightly as magazines were swapped with mechanical precision. The medic checked on the wounded again, his expression grim but focused. The injured operator was conscious, teeth clenched against the pain, refusing morphine so he could stay alert. That kind of resolve was both inspiring and heartbreaking. The team leader took a moment to scan each face, reading the unspoken thoughts behind their eyes. No fear of death, just the burden of unfinished duty and loyalty to one another. He knew what they were all thinking. If this was going to be their last stand, they would make it count. They adjusted their positions, overlapping fields of fire, turning their desperation into discipline. Each man became hyper, aware of his sector, his responsibility, his brothers beside him. Enemy voices echoed faintly in the distance, carried on the wind. They were confident now, almost celebratory. They believed time was on their side, that exhaustion and dwindling ammunition would do their work for them. The SEALs listened in silence, understanding the psychological game being played. It was meant to break them, to force a mistake. But silence was their answer, patience their weapon. Minutes felt like hours. Every sound, gravel shifting, fabric brushing against stone, triggered a spike of adrenaline. Fingers rested on triggers, muscles coiled and ready. They counted rounds again, mentally this time. The numbers were worse than before. A few magazines left, a handful of grenades, barely enough to hold a sustained fight. The truth was unavoidable now. They were nearing the end of their endurance. Yet, in that bleak stillness, something hardened inside them. Desperation stripped away doubt, leaving only clarity. They had been trained for moments like this, not to win, necessarily, but to endure. To hold the line, to protect each other no matter the cost. As the enemy began their slow advance, boots crunching against rock in the darkness, the SEAL team steadied themselves, prepared to face whatever came next. They didn't know how the night would end, but they were ready to meet it head on. Just as the enemy's movement grew more deliberate, something changed in the rhythm of the night. It was subtle at first, almost imperceptible, like a shift in the wind. The SEALs felt it before they understood it, a pause in the advancing voices, a hesitation where confidence had been moments earlier. Then came the sound, a single, sharp crack that echoed off the valley walls, distinct from the chaotic gunfire they had grown used to. It wasn't followed by a spray of bullets or shouted commands. It stood alone, precise and final. One of the hostile silhouettes on the ridgeline collapsed without warning, dropping out of sight as if the darkness itself had swallowed him. The SEALs exchanged quick glances, instincts flaring. None of them had fired. Another crack followed, slightly farther to the left, and another figure fell. Still, no muzzle flash. No traceable position, just controlled. Deliberate shots delivered from somewhere beyond their line of sight. Confusion rippled through the enemy ranks. The confident murmurs turned into sharp, urgent shouts as fighters scrambled for cover that no longer felt safe. They began firing wildly into the darkness, tracer rounds stitching the hillside, but it was useless. Whoever was shooting wasn't reacting. He was dictating the tempo. Each shot came after a calculated pause, as if the shooter was choosing targets with absolute certainty. The SEAL team leader raised a clenched fist, signaling a hold. No one moved, no one spoke. They listened. Another shot rang out, closer this time, followed by the unmistakable sound of a body hitting rock. The enemy advance stalled completely. Fear had replaced momentum, and fear was contagious. The valley, which had felt so tight and suffocating moments ago, suddenly seemed larger, emptier. The SEALs realized then that this wasn't random help or blind luck. This was a professional. The spacing between shots, the way each enemy dropped without warning, it spoke of experience measured in years, maybe decades. This wasn't someone spraying fire to create chaos. This was someone surgically dismantling the threat. Through night vision optics, one of the SEALs scanned the ridgeline, searching for movement. Nothing. No heat signature out of place. No obvious firing position. It was as if the shooter had melted into the terrain, becoming part of the mountain itself. Another shot echoed, and another hostile went down, this time a leader judging by the frantic response that followed. The enemy began to pull back, dragging wounded, abandoning their slow, confident advance. Panic crept into their movements, coordination unraveling under the pressure of an unseen predator. For the first time all night, the SEALs felt the balance shift. They weren't just holding anymore, they were being given space to breathe. Then, through a barely audible click over their comms, a calm voice cut through the static, low and steady. "SEALs, stay down, you're covered." No call sign, no explanation, just certainty. In that moment, the desperation that had weighed so heavily on them eased, replaced by something they hadn't felt in hours, relief mixed with awe. From the shadows, without warning or recognition, a master sniper had entered the fight, and everything had changed. The shots continued, but now there was a pattern to them that only trained eyes could recognize. Each report came from a different direction, never twice from the same angle, creating the illusion of multiple shooters spread across the high ground. In reality, it was a single mind at work, calculating distance, wind, elevation, and enemy behavior faster than most men could think. The sniper wasn't just eliminating targets, he was shaping the battlefield, herding fear and confusion exactly where he wanted them. Enemy fighters tried to regroup, shouting orders and pointing frantically into the darkness, but every attempt at leadership was cut short. Anyone who lingered too long in the open fell instantly, dropped by a round so clean it barely seemed real. There was no wasted motion, no dramatic spray of fire. One shot, one result. The precision was almost unsettling. Even seasoned SEALs, men who had fought alongside the best shooters in the world, felt a quiet respect settle in their chests as they watched the enemy unravel. Using the opening they'd been given, the SEAL team began to adjust their positions. Movements were slow, deliberate, perfectly timed between the sniper's shots. It was as if he could see them too, anticipating when they needed space, when pressure had to be applied. Every time hostile eyes shifted toward the SEAL's perimeter, a crack echoed from the darkness, and that threat disappeared. The unseen shooter was protecting them without ever stepping into view. The enemy attempted a desperate counter-blind suppressive fire toward the ridgeline. RPG launched more in panic than strategy. Explosions tore through empty rock and dirt, lighting up the night for brief seconds. Each flash revealed nothing useful, only how exposed and disorganized the attackers had become. When the light faded, the sniper resumed his work, methodical and merciless. Another leader down, another radio operator silenced. The structure holding the enemy force together collapsed piece by piece. Through night vision, one SEAL caught a fleeting glimpse, a faint distortion, a shape that wasn't quite shadow and wasn't quite man. Then it was gone. Whoever this sniper was, he understood concealment as deeply as he understood marksmanship. He moved when no one was looking, fired from places no one would think to search, and vanished before retaliation could even be considered. Minutes stretched on, but the intensity shifted. What had been a siege turned into a slow, humiliating retreat for the enemy. Fighters pulled back toward the far end of the valley, some fleeing outright, others dragging wounded comrades with panicked urgency. The once confident voices were gone, replaced by scattered shouts and the chaotic sounds of escape. The SEAL team didn't chase. They didn't need to. The sniper had already won the psychological battle. By dominating the field with precision and restraint, he had broken the enemy's will far more effectively than brute force ever could. Silence gradually reclaimed the valley, broken only by distant footsteps fading into the night. For the first time since the ambush began, the seals allowed themselves to breathe. Fingers loosened slightly on triggers, shoulders dropped. They were still alive not because of luck, but because someone with extraordinary skill had decided they would be. And as the echoes of the final shots faded, one thing was undeniable. They had just witnessed mastery in its purest form, delivered quietly, efficiently, and without a need for recognition. When the last echoes of gunfire finally dissolved into the night, the silence felt almost unreal. It pressed down on the valley, thick and heavy, forcing everyone to confront what had just happened. The SEAL team remained in position for several long moments, disciplined enough not to move too quickly, eyes still scanning for threats that might return. But nothing did. The enemy was gone, not regrouping, not probing, gone for good. The team leader broke the silence first, issuing quiet commands to conduct a sweep and check on one another. The wounded were stabilized, ammunition redistributed, sectors reassigned, not out of panic now, but habit. Professionalism didn't fade just because danger had passed. Still, something had changed in their posture. The tight edge of desperation was gone, replaced by a cautious calm. They had survived, and every man there knew they owed that survival to someone they hadn't even seen. A soft transmission came through the comms again, clearer this time. The voice was controlled, older than they expected, carrying no trace of excitement or pride. He gave them directions, safe movement routes, areas to avoid, a suggested exfil window. He spoke like someone who had studied the valley for years, not hours. When the team leader asked for identification, there was a pause, not hesitation, consideration. Then a simple reply, just a friend who doesn't like seeing good men die. That was all he offered. As they moved, the SEALs followed his guidance without question. Every route he marked proved clean, every warning accurate. It became obvious that this sniper hadn't just intervened, he had been watching long before the first shot was fired. That realization carried weight. This wasn't coincidence or luck. This was intention. At a distance, just before dawn began to soften the edges of the mountains, one of the SEALs finally spotted him. Not clearly, just a figure standing on high ground, rifle slung, watching to ensure they were clear. No salute, no signal. The man turned and disappeared into the terrain as naturally as he had emerged, swallowed by rock and shadow. Later, during debriefs, the questions would come. Intelligence officers would comb satellite data, review thermal footage, search for records of contractors, allies, or ghost units operating off the grid. They would find nothing conclusive, no confirmed name, no official presence, just unexplained enemy casualties and a SEAL team that should not have made it home, but did. Among the team, however, the story settled differently. It wasn't about mystery or speculation. It was about recognition. Every man there understood what they had witnessed, the quiet professionalism of someone who didn't need acknowledgement, who measured success only by lives saved. Respect passed between warriors without words. Long after the mission faded into classified files and unspoken memories, the lesson remained. True mastery didn't announce itself. It didn't seek applause or validation. It operated in silence, stepped in when needed, and vanished once the job was done. And whenever the SEALs spoke of that night, never officially, never in detail, they spoke of it with the same tone reserved for legends. Not because of the shots fired, but because of the restraint shown. Because when everything was lost, a shadow chose to act. And that choice made all the difference.